No one expected a billionaire to buy a single mother, not even her. Lena sat in a dimly lit room, her fingers gripping the armrests of the chair as she listened to the sound of the auctioneer's voice echo through the grand hall. Wealthy men, draped in power and privilege, raised their hands as they bid, not for objects or possessions, but for women. She never imagined she would end up here. A mother. A fighter. And now, a prize to be won. The number on the screen kept climbing. Higher and higher, as if her worth could be measured in money. She wanted to scream, to run, but there was nowhere to go. Then, the room fell silent. A deep voice cut through the air like a blade. 5 million. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one had bid that high before. Lena turned her head slowly, her breath catching as she saw him. Khalid. The billionaire. The man who owned skyscrapers, oil fields, and industries that stretched across continents. He wasn't just rich, he was power itself. And he had just bought her. The gavel slammed down. Sold. Lena's stomach twisted. She had no choice now. Minutes later, she was escorted to a waiting limousine, her hands trembling in her lap as Khalid slid in beside her. His presence filled the car, his gaze unreadable, his jaw sharp with authority. I don't need a wife, he said, his voice smooth yet distant. I need an heir. Lena stiffened. He wasn't looking for love. He wasn't looking for companionship. He was buying a mother. Khalid leaned back, studying her reaction. You will be taken care of, he continued. Your child will have the best of everything. But you will abide by my rules. Lena's hands curled into fists. She had thought she was being sold as a companion. A mistress, even. But this? This was something else entirely. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. And if I say no? Khalid's expression didn't change. You don't have that option. The weight of his words settled into her chest like stone. She had been chosen. But why? As the car pulled away, taking her toward a fate she couldn't escape, Lena knew one thing for certain. Khalid thought he had control of this deal. But there was something he didn't know. A secret she had buried deep. A secret that would change everything. The estate was unlike anything Lena had ever seen. Golden chandeliers hung from high ceilings, casting warm light over marble floors. The scent of fresh jasmine filled the air, carried by a gentle breeze from the open balcony doors. Servants moved silently, their eyes downcast, their movements precise. But despite the luxury surrounding her, Lena felt like a caged bird. She followed Khalid down a long hallway, her heart pounding with each step. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken rules. Finally, they entered a private sitting room. Khalid gestured toward the plush armchair across from him. Sit. Lena hesitated, then lowered herself into the seat, her hands clenched in her lap. He studied her for a moment before speaking. I know everything about you. Her stomach tightened. I know you have no family, he continued. No job. No future. Lena swallowed hard, refusing to look away. She wouldn't let him see the fear creeping up her spine. Khalid leaned forward. You think this is a prison, but it's not. This is an opportunity. You will be given the best medical care, the finest clothes, anything you desire. In return, you will bear my child. Lena forced herself to speak. And after that? His expression didn't change. After that, your job is done. A cold chill ran through her. Her child would be his. Not hers. She had sold herself into a contract that had only one outcome, loss. Khalid stood, his movements smooth and controlled. There is no going back. From this moment on, your past does not exist. Lena's fingers trembled as she gripped the fabric of her dress. He thought she was just another desperate woman, another nameless soul willing to trade her body for security. But he was wrong. Because she had a past. A past that involved her son. A boy she had kept hidden from the world. A boy who was supposed to be safe. And now, sitting in this golden palace, she realized the truth. Khalid hadn't just chosen her at random. He had known exactly who she was. And worse, he knew about Daniel. Lena's mind raced as she lay in the grand bedroom Khalid had given her, but sleep refused to come. The silk sheets beneath her felt foreign, the room too large, too quiet. She wasn't used to silence. Back home, Daniel's soft breathing, his occasional murmurs in his sleep, were the only sounds she needed. But Daniel wasn't here. And that terrified her more than anything. She sat up in bed, her breath shallow. The memory of Khalid's words played over and over in her head. I know everything about you. Had he meant Daniel? Had he known all along? She needed answers. Carefully, she slipped out of bed and padded toward the door, pressing her ear against it. Silence. Slowly, she turned the handle and stepped into the dimly lit hallway. The estate was eerily quiet at night. Moonlight spilled in through arched windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Lena moved quickly, her bare feet soundless against the cool surface. She had no plan, just a desperate need to find something, anything, that would tell her what Khalid really knew. She passed doors she had never seen before, corridors that stretched endlessly. Then, at the end of the hall, she spotted his office. The heavy wooden door was slightly ajar. Her pulse pounded as she pushed it open just enough to slip inside. The room smelled of leather and expensive cologne. A massive desk sat in the center, papers stacked neatly on top. A single lamp cast a soft glow over the surface. Lena's hands trembled as she sifted through the papers. Most of them were business documents, stock reports, contracts, financial transactions. Nothing that connected to her. Then she saw it. A black folder with a single word stamped across the front. Lena. Her breath hitched. She flipped it open and felt the air leave her lungs. Her entire life was inside. Old medical records. Her employment history. Her eviction notices. It was all there, every mistake, every desperate moment she had fought to survive. But it was the last page that made her blood run cold. Daniel's birth certificate. Lena gripped the paper so tightly it crumpled in her hands. How? How had he found this? The door behind her clicked. She whirled around, her heart slamming against her ribs. Khalid stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. You weren't chosen by accident, he said quietly. Lena took a shaky step back. What do you want with my son? Khalid's eyes darkened. Not just your son, Lena. You. Her breath caught. What are you talking about? Khalid stepped forward, closing the distance between them. I knew from the moment I saw you. His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something dangerous. You carry something rare. Something valuable. Lena shook her head. I don't understand. Khalid exhaled, watching her carefully. You will. She gritted her teeth. Tell me now. For the first time, hesitation flickered in his gaze. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said. Because, Lena, your son isn't normal. The words sent a shock through her body. Her knees nearly buckled. She stared at him, willing him to take it back, to say it was a lie. But deep down, she knew. She had always known. Lena's breath came in shallow gasps. The room felt smaller, closing in around her. What do you mean my son isn't normal? She whispered, her hands gripping the edge of the desk for support. Khalid held her gaze, his expression unreadable. I've been searching for someone like you for a long time, he said slowly. And when I found your son's records, I knew. Lena shook her head, a sharp denial forming on her lips. Daniel is just a little boy. He's smart, sure, but... He's more than smart, Lena, Khalid interrupted. He has abilities that no child his age should have. His intelligence, his instincts, his awareness, he's special. Lena's heart pounded. How could Khalid know that? She had spent years hiding it, keeping Daniel away from doctors and scientists who would question why a 5-year-old could solve complex puzzles, remember conversations word for word, and sense emotions before people spoke. She had told herself it was just a gift. Nothing more. But Khalid was telling her otherwise. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. Khalid studied her for a moment before stepping forward. Lena, do you know who I am? She narrowed her eyes. You're a billionaire who thinks he can buy anything. A small smirk played on Khalid's lips. Partly true. But my wealth isn't just from business. My family, we have something others don't. Something powerful. Lena stiffened. Like what? Khalid exhaled. My ancestors carried a genetic trait. A mutation, some might call it. It gave us abilities beyond normal men. Enhanced minds, heightened senses, control over things most people don't even understand. But over generations, it weakened. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. You're saying? She swallowed, barely able to form the words. Daniel has this? Khalid nodded. And so do you. Her stomach twisted. That's impossible. Is it? Khalid raised an eyebrow. Have you never wondered why you feel things before they happen? Why your instincts have always led you to survive? Why your son is unlike any child you've ever met? Lena wanted to scream that he was wrong. That Daniel was normal. That she was normal. But deep down, she couldn't. Because some part of her had always known. She staggered back, her breath ragged. So what happens now? Khalid's face darkened. Now, we protect him. Because if I found out about Daniel. He hesitated. Others will too. A cold chill ran down Lena's spine. She had spent years running from shadows she couldn't see. Now, she finally knew why. And the real danger was only just beginning. Lena felt as if the floor beneath her had vanished. The weight of Khalid's words pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. Others would find out. Others would come for Daniel. Her son, the child she had fought so hard to protect, was now a target. She forced herself to stand tall, ignoring the fear clawing at her throat. If that's true, then we have to leave, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I won't let anyone take him. Khalid watched her, his expression unreadable. Then he shook his head. It's not that simple. Lena's stomach twisted. Why not? Because they already know. The words sent a bolt of terror through her. She clenched her fists. Who knows? Khalid hesitated for the first time since she had met him. There's a group, he said finally. An organization older than any government, more powerful than any army. They call themselves the Order. Lena swallowed hard. They've been searching for a child like Daniel for a long time, Khalid continued. And now that they know he exists, they won't stop until they have him. Lena's legs felt weak. She sank onto the chair behind her. Why? Khalid exhaled. Because if Daniel truly carries the full extent of the genetic trait, he may be the most powerful one we've seen in centuries. The room fell silent. Lena gritted her teeth. He's just a boy. Khalid's jaw tightened. Not to them. Lena shook her head, her pulse racing. I don't care how powerful they are. They're not taking my son. Khalid's gaze softened. I know. That's why I brought you here. She blinked, startled. What? I needed to make sure, he admitted. To see if you would fight for him. If you would protect him. Anger flared in her chest. You put me through all of this just to test me? Yes. His voice was firm, unwavering. Because I need you to understand what's coming. Lena stood, her hands trembling. And what exactly is coming? Khalid's expression darkened. War. The word sent a shiver through her. He took a slow step forward, lowering his voice. You don't know what these people are capable of, Lena. They don't just take people, they erase them. They will come for Daniel, and they will not stop. Lena's breath hitched. She had spent her entire life hiding, running, trying to keep Daniel safe. But no matter how far she had gone, the danger had always been there, lurking just beneath the surface. And now it had found them. Khalid reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. He handed it to her. What is this? She asked. Your way out. She opened it carefully. Inside was a passport, a plane ticket, and a new identity. Khalid's voice was quiet. I can get you out of here tonight. You and Daniel. Lena stared at him. And what about you? Khalid's lips pressed into a thin line. I'll stay behind. I can buy you time. But once you leave, you can't come back. Her hands tightened around the envelope. She had spent so many years running. But now, for the first time, she wasn't sure if running was enough. She looked up at Khalid, her heart pounding. Tell me the truth, she whispered. If I leave, will Daniel ever be safe? Khalid hesitated. Then he exhaled. No. Lena swallowed hard. For the first time since this nightmare began, she knew exactly what she had to do. She wasn't going to run. She was going to fight. Lena clenched the envelope in her hands, her pulse pounding. For years, she had lived in fear, always looking over her shoulder, always wondering when the past would catch up to her. And now, here it was, standing in front of her, wrapped in power and danger. She could take the envelope. She could run. But she knew the truth now. Running wouldn't save Daniel. It would only delay the inevitable. She lifted her eyes to Khalid, her voice steady. I'm not leaving. Khalid's brows furrowed. Lena. No, she interrupted. You said it yourself. They won't stop. No matter where we go, they'll find us. She took a breath, grounding herself. So, I'm done running. For the first time, Khalid looked genuinely surprised. His gaze held hers for a long moment before he nodded, a quiet respect flickering in his expression. Then we prepare. Lena exhaled. What do we do? Khalid walked toward his desk and pressed a hidden panel beneath it. A drawer slid open, revealing a small black device. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands. The order is powerful, but they're not untouchable, he said. I have connections. People who have been waiting for a reason to fight back. Lena crossed her arms. And you trust them? Khalid looked at her, something dark in his expression. No. But I trust that they hate the order more than they fear them. Lena's stomach twisted. This was bigger than she had imagined. I need you to understand something, Khalid continued. Once we make a move, there's no turning back. They will retaliate. Lena swallowed hard. What does that mean? Khalid hesitated. It means they won't just come for Daniel anymore. They'll come for you, for me. They will erase everything in their path. A chill ran down her spine. She thought of Daniel, her sweet, brilliant boy. She had spent his whole life protecting him from shadows she couldn't see. But now, those shadows had a name. And she was ready to face them. Then we hit them first, she said. Khalid's lips curled into the faintest smirk. I was hoping you'd say that. He pressed a button on the device in his hand. A moment later, the security system in the estate shut down. Lights flickered. The cameras went dark. Lena's heart pounded. What did you just do? Khalid glanced at her. I just told the world that we're done hiding. A loud bang echoed from somewhere in the estate. Lena turned sharply toward the sound. They were already here. The war had begun. Lena's breath caught as the sound echoed through the grand estate, followed by hurried footsteps and muffled voices barking orders. They're here, she whispered. Khalid didn't hesitate. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the side of the room. Pressing his palm against a hidden panel on the wall, he revealed a concealed passageway. "We don't have much time." Lena hesitated. "Daniel. He's safe, for now," Khalid said firmly. "But if we don't act fast, they'll take him." Lena's heart pounded as she followed him into the passage. The walls were narrow, lined with reinforced steel. The air smelled of dust and secrecy. "Where does this lead?" she asked. "To the armory." She blinked. "You have an armory?" Khalid gave her a sharp look. "You don't stay rich and alive without one." Another gunshot rang out, closer this time. The sound of shattering glass followed, sending a tremor through the floor beneath them. Lena clenched her fists. "Who are these people?" Khalid kept moving. "They're not just soldiers. The order trains their men from childhood, highly skilled, highly loyal. They don't feel fear, and they don't leave witnesses." A cold chill ran down her spine. Khalid reached the end of the corridor and punched in a code. The door slid open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with weapons. Lena's breath hitched. Assault rifles, handguns, tactical gear, all lined neatly on the walls. "You expect me to fight?" she asked, her voice tight. Khalid turned to her, his expression deadly serious. "You said you were done running. This is what standing your ground looks like." Lena exhaled sharply. Her entire life, she had avoided violence, believed she could protect Daniel with distance, with careful planning. But these people didn't care how far she ran. They were coming for her child. She reached for a gun. It felt cold, foreign in her hands, but she tightened her grip. "What's the plan?" Khalid smirked, a glint of approval in his eyes. "We get to Daniel, and we end this before they take him." Another explosion rocked the estate. Dust rained from the ceiling. Khalid loaded his weapon. "We move now." Lena swallowed her fear. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't trained for this. But she was a mother. And she would do whatever it took to protect her son. The door slid open. The fight for Daniel had begun. The hallway outside the armory was chaos. Footsteps pounded as masked figures, armed and determined, moved swiftly down the corridors. The estate was under siege, the once luxurious halls now echoing with the sounds of battle. Lena's heart raced as she followed Khalid, her grip tight around the gun. She could feel the weight of it, of her decision, pressing on her chest. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about saving her son. Khalid moved with precision, taking silent steps down the corridor, eyes scanning every corner, every door. He led Lena through a series of back rooms, each one more fortified than the last. He knew the estate better than anyone, but that didn't stop the adrenaline from surging in his veins. "They'll be heading for Daniel's room," Khalid muttered. "We need to get there first." Lena nodded, her thoughts sharp, focused. She had never been in a fight like this before, never imagined her life would lead her to a point where she was running through halls with a weapon in her hand, trying to save her child from shadowy figures that seemed to appear from nowhere. But here she was. "Stay close," Khalid instructed. "They'll try to separate us. Don't let them." Lena kept her eyes ahead, her senses on high alert. Every noise, every flicker of movement sent a rush of adrenaline through her. She could hear the faint sounds of gunfire, distant but growing closer. The estate was a maze, and Lena wasn't sure how much time they had left. They rounded a corner, and Lena's breath caught. At the far end of the hallway stood a group of men, all dressed in black tactical gear, weapons raised and ready. They had made it to the room where Daniel was being kept. Khalid didn't hesitate. He moved first, drawing his weapon and taking cover behind a pillar. Lena followed suit, her body pressed against the cold marble wall. She felt the weight of the gun in her hands, the reality of what was about to happen settling deep in her chest. Khalid's voice was low, sharp. "On my mark, we make our move." Lena nodded, her hands trembling. She wasn't sure what to expect, But she knew this moment would define everything. Then, without warning, Khalid lunged forward, firing 2 quick shots. The sound echoed through the hall, followed by shouts and a flurry of movement. The men scattered, trying to take cover behind nearby furniture and walls. Lena didn't hesitate. She ran. Her legs carried her forward, her heart pounding as she reached the door to Daniel's room. She burst through it, gun raised, ready for anything. But the room was empty. Her pulse raced as she scanned the space, dark, silent, and void of her son. No, she gasped, her breath catching in her throat. Khalid entered behind her, his eyes darting around the room. They've taken him. Lena's chest tightened as the words sank in. Where? She demanded, her voice cracking with fear. We're running out of time, Khalid said, his tone colder now. He moved toward the window, peering through the blinds. They've already moved him. Lena felt her world shift. She was too late. The very people she had feared were closing in on her son, and now they had him. But she wasn't done yet. She would not lose him. Not after everything they had been through. Khalid turned to face her, his expression hard. We're not done. We find him, and we finish this. Lena looked at him, determination setting in her bones. She wasn't just going to fight for Daniel anymore, she was going to take the fight to them. And for the first time, she felt a surge of strength she had never known. They weren't just running anymore. They were going to win. Lena's heart raced as she and Khalid moved quickly through the darkened corridors of the estate. The realization that Daniel was no longer in his room weighed heavily on her, but her determination burned even fiercer. She wasn't going to let fear control her. Not now. Not when it mattered most. Khalid led the way, his movements swift and silent. He was a man used to operating in the shadows, but Lena had learned quickly in the past few hours. She was no longer the woman who had walked into this house in fear, she was the woman willing to burn it down if it meant saving her son. They reached a side door at the back of the estate, and Khalid paused, motioning for Lena to stay quiet. He peeked around the corner, scanning the hall before nodding. This is where it starts, he said softly. If we can get through this level, we can get to the underground tunnels. The Order uses them for their operations. It's the only way out. Lena nodded, her breath steady, despite the chaos around her. She could do this. Khalid pushed open the door to reveal a small, dimly lit hallway. The sounds of footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. They had to be close. She could feel the urgency pressing in, the seconds slipping away. They moved through the dark halls with a quiet precision, the gun in Lena's hands now feeling like an extension of her body. They passed empty rooms, thick velvet curtains drawn across windows, blocking any light from the outside. The mansion was a fortress, but it was also a maze. Khalid stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. He peered around the corner. Lena's breath caught as she saw them, several figures, cloaked in black, moving silently in the distance. They were in front of a large wooden door at the end of the hall, guarding the entrance. They're close, Khalid murmured. That's where they're holding him. Lena's eyes burned with determination. Let's end this. Khalid motioned to the left. There's a back entrance. We'll take them by surprise. They moved quickly and quietly to the side of the hallway. Khalid carefully cracked the door open, peering inside. Through the small gap, Lena could see Daniel, sitting quietly in a chair. In the center of the room. His arms were bound, but his eyes, those intelligent, sharp eyes, were fixed on the door, as if he knew they were coming. Lena's heart clenched at the sight of him. He was her world, her reason for fighting. And he had been waiting for her. Khalid turned to her. You ready? She didn't need to say anything. The look in her eyes said it all. They burst through the door, weapons raised. The men inside barely had time to react before Khalid fired 2 shots, taking them down. The last one reached for his gun, but Lena was faster. She fired, the bullet hitting its mark. The room fell into silence, the only sound the steady thrum of Lena's heart as she rushed to her son. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice cracking as she dropped to her knees in front of him. She gently cupped his face in her hands, her eyes searching his for any sign of fear. His lips curled into a small, reassuring smile. "I knew you'd come for me, Mom." Lena's breath hitched as she pulled him into a tight embrace. "I'll never let anyone take you again. Never." Khalid watched them quietly, his expression unreadable. He had helped them get this far, but Lena could see the weight of everything on his shoulders. He had made sacrifices to help her, to protect them. But the war was far from over. "We're not safe yet," Khalid said, his voice low. "The order will send reinforcements. We need to move quickly." Lena nodded, pulling Daniel to his feet. "Then let's finish this." They moved swiftly, knowing that time was running out. Khalid led them through the maze of tunnels beneath the estate, his knowledge of the underground passages proving invaluable. They passed secret chambers and hidden rooms, the air thick with tension. But it wasn't just the walls that felt suffocating, it was the weight of the decision they had to make. Would they escape and live in hiding, or would they confront the very people who had turned their lives upside down? As they neared the exit, Lena looked down at Daniel, his hand firmly grasped in hers. "I don't know where this will take us," she whispered. "But I promise you, we'll face it together." Khalid glanced back at them, his eyes tired but resolute. "Together," he echoed. The world outside awaited them, full of danger and uncertainty. But Lena didn't care anymore. She had her son. She had made it this far, and she would keep going. Because sometimes, the only way to truly fight for the future is to face the darkness head-on. And no matter what came next, they would fight with everything they had. Together.